It's always strange when you become the story, when people are talking about what happens to journalists. Well, what happened to Alison Pearson's all over our front page. It's been all over the website. Everyone's talking about it. I think it's a very chilling story. I'm going to let Alison explain it. This is her talking on the latest edition of the Telegraph's Planet Normal podcast. And I should say that she refers to himself. That's her way of describing her husband.
For 9:40, himself came upstairs and looked a bit pale and said there's some police at the door. So I wasn't unduly bothered. I thought that's a bit strange. I went down. There were 2 Essex constables, and the one on the left said something about a non-crime hate incident. I thought I heard that correctly. And he said it was relating to a social media post a year ago. So I said, what was it? What was the offence? And he said it was stirring up racial hatred. So I just asked him to tell me what it was, what particular tweet and what words, and couldn't think of anything that would have stirred up racial hatred. I'm not in the habit of doing that. And then he said, we're not allowed to tell you. And then I said, can you tell me the name of the accuser? Because that might then give me a bit more information. And he said, no, we're not allowed to tell you that either, but they're not the accuser, they're called the victim. So that was interesting. And then I said, how am I supposed to defend myself if I don't know any of the details of what I'm being accused of? So it was deeply odd. I was dumbfounded, upset. It's not very nice. I was in my dressing gown on the step of the house. These 2 coppers were there just outside the door, and there were people gathering, for Remembrance Day. So there were people watching from the other side of the road. And I don't know at which point I said to these coppers that this is a special day in the calendar because we commemorate the sacrifice of tens of thousands of mainly young men your age who gave their lives so we could live in a free country, not under the jackboot of tyranny. And I said, I don't know what they would think of you being here today to basically interview me about a thought crime.
Alison speaking there on the Planet Normal podcast. Do go and find that podcast on whichever platform you listen to your podcast, because it's a remarkable testimony from Alison. Since then, Alison has also spoken to GB News. She was interviewed by Nigel Farage, and she said there that it is likely that she's going to attend a voluntary police interview. She says that the Free Speech Union, which she describes as a brilliant organisation, she says is helping her. And she said they're going to give me a solicitor, so if I have to go into the police station and have a voluntary interview, I will go in. And maybe then we will find out what I am accused of, and then we will see how it progresses. So we'll obviously keep you up to date with all that. But Tim, why don't we go first through... This raises so many different questions. What are police for? What is a crime? Should the police be policing opinions on social media? And this odd phrase which we are talking about, what is a non-crime hate incident?
So a non-crime hate incident is speech or posts believed by the police to be, quote, motivated by hostility or prejudice. That's based on someone's race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or transgender identity. But these are things which do not meet the threshold of a crime. Despite lacking any criminality, individuals are logged by the police, and the incidents can even turn up in background checks known as disclosure and barring service checks. Yvette Cooper, the current Home Secretary, has said that she's going to require police to report more non-crime hate in light of a spike of anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents since the October the 7th attacks in Israel. This is an approach which would reverse a change by Suella Braverman when she was Home Secretary, who raised the threshold for reporting such incidents over concerns about freedom of speech.
I suppose, Tim, it's very complicated. I think, personally, it probably comes from good intentions.
Right.
If we think right back to the murder of Stephen Lawrence in the 1990s, young black student who was murdered in southeast London by white thugs. And the police completely and utterly failed in the investigation into that murder. It led to the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And the whole idea of crimes motivated by hateful prejudice became something that the police had to be more aware of, because they didn't record it as a race crime or a crime in any way connected to the fact that Stephen Lawrence was a young black man. And out of that came the idea that we have to have better mechanisms for what are the signals that may have led up to these horrific types of events. And quite similar for women, and as Yvette Cooper has argued, now with anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So out of that came the idea of how do we think slightly differently about groups that are attacked. And this led to this grey area of, it's not a crime, but it could be a signal for the future. And it was that, some could argue, noble intention that has hit public and police bureaucracy and has, almost by definition now, become ridiculous. Because there are some very good reasons for seeing posts, anti-Semitic posts, aggressive Muslim hate, racism, misogyny. If those things are being posted, action should be taken, or it could be a signal that something awful will happen in the future. That seems to be perfectly reasonable. But if you just keep piling, or take that to the nth degree, you get people knocking on journalists' doors on Remembrance Sunday saying you could be guilty of a non-crime hate incident. So it's that classic noble intention hits bureaucracy, becomes ridiculous.
Yeah. And of course, some people would say that the intention isn't noble because what it's about is getting the police to investigate or to log something which isn't a crime, which is something beyond their purview, which leads them down the road of trying to, in some way, police opinion. This is like thought crime. This is sci-fi stuff where you try and arrest someone before they've committed the crime, or you try and put the frighteners on them before they committed the crime. So some people would say, okay, obviously we all want to tackle prejudice, we all want to nip it in the bud, but anything which alters the fundamental operating principles of the police, i.e. they should go after something which isn't actually a crime, is not in itself a good intention. And of course the other problem is it creates a mechanism for bad faith actors to try to use the police to shut down people who they're arguing with or who they disagree with. And there are some examples which are particularly perverse, which illustrate that. Perhaps the most famous example was when Amber Rudd told the Tory party conference that it should be harder to employ foreign workers. An Oxford academic took offence at those words, complained, and what she said was registered as a non-crime hate incident.
Let's go into that one, because that's a really interesting case, and I think absolutely, as you say, Tim, shows so many of the problems with where we are on this incident. So anyone who complains about anything they see is seen as a victim and has to be believed. Because one of the issues around Stephen Lawrence was that the family, Doreen and Neville Lawrence, his parents, weren't believed by the police that this was a racially motivated crime and didn't take it seriously. So the burden was put onto the police to always believe what are described as victims. So anyone can complain, and then it is logged, which is what happened, as you say, with Amber Rudd. I just looked at the full fact-checking website after the Amber Rudd incident. And what happened there was, this is where you get to this Kafkaesque situation. West Midlands police confirmed that Amber Rudd's speech was not clearly a hate crime, but it was still logged as a non-crime hate incident, even though they did not agree with it. And Full Fact says the terminology might make it sound like the police agree the content of the speech was hateful, but that isn't true. Their own rules say all reports of incidents have to be recorded in a way that suggests to anyone externally, oh, Amber Rudd was guilty. But it's not. It's just the fact that someone complained about Amber Rudd. West Midlands Police didn't agree with it, but it's still logged.
I mean, I'd also point out that in that situation, who is precisely the victim? Because the person was complaining on behalf of foreign workers who they felt had been slighted by Amber Rudd. Well, the person who made that complaint was, I presume, not themselves a foreign worker about to be brought into the country to do manual work, right? So they're complaining on behalf. They're taking offence on behalf of someone else. So I'm not even sure morally where the locus of victimhood is. There are other examples. There was a man who was denied service from a pub in Wales because he said because he was English. That was logged. It turned out that he was actually denied service because he was drunk. There was someone was registered, was logged for saying that they found the war in the Middle East to be quote-unquote disturbing. And my favourite example is Sarah Phillimore, a family law barrister who decided to test the lunacy of the system by posting on social media that she thought her cat might be a Methodist. A friend then reported this remark to the South Yorkshire Police, saying that the tweet suggested that Methodists were wandering pests that defecate in people's gardens. And lo and behold, it was logged.
It would be a crime, Tim, if Methodists were walking around defecating.
See, that would be the crime. Why can't the police investigate the defecating Methodists rather than the people bringing our attention to the defecating Methodists? Yeah. The policing of speech, of course, does not just stop at logging non-crime hate incidents. A Tory MP was fined for saying go back to Bahrain to an activist. A guest on GB News was fingerprinted and her DNA was taken after she talked about trans rights extremists. And a teenager with Asperger's was given 8 weeks curfew and a tag after posting some rap lyrics.
This all comes alongside a bigger conversation about the police's ability to solve actual crimes,
yes,
not non-crime hate incidents. And that is actually an insult to the English language in any case. And if we look at those figures, our head of data, Ben Butcher, regular guest on the Daily Tea, he has looked at the numbers and you can see his detailed reporting on the Telegraph. But he has revealed that police are recording more non-crime hate incidents than ever before. The number increased by 0.4% from 11,600 in the year to June 2023 and 11,700 in the year to 2024. So they are logging more of these incidents, but actual crime is going down. The actual crimes being solved is going down. Let's look at Essex Police. That's the police force that where Alison lives, and those were the officers. That was the force that the officers came from. Essex Police only managed to solve 6.3% of burglaries in the last 12 months, 9.6% of sexual offences, and of all the reported crimes, they only managed to solve 14.3% up until September of this year. So what happens? We always have to understand policing is by consent. And if the police get themselves into situations that are ridiculous to the people they are policing, i.e. us, the public, that consent starts to break down.
Yes.
Trust breaks down. And whereas the police are quite rightly heavily criticised for their lack of activity about areas like violence against women,
yes,
they have been criticised as well about how they've been policing the various demonstrations around Gaza. These easy logging of non-crime hate incidents are going up and up and up because it shows activity.
Yeah. You never want to be in a situation where you're a figure of authority and people are laughing at you. And what Alison Pearson describes happening to her, I find it frightening as a writer myself. It does have a chilling effect because you're now from now on be thinking everything I write, could someone lodge a complaint about this? Because I have a terror of the police and of authority and all them knocking on my door. So it's frightening, but it's also a bit ridiculous at the same time.
And at the same time, Tim, they're also demanding, the police forces are demanding more money. So the Metropolitan Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, he's been on the BBC's Political Thinking podcast. At the time that this row is what people are talking about in policing, he's on there asking for more money. Let's hear that.
Deeply troubled by the situation we appear to be heading towards, and this is not just about this year's decisions, but it's a cumulative effect of decisions over the last decade or so, which have put us in a more and more precarious position. Some of the things that successive commissioners and mayors have used to balance the books, like selling police stations and using reserves, all of those things have run out. So those have propped up the budget. Those props have gone. The Chancellor's been very clear it's a difficult public sector context. You add all those things together and you get a dramatic change in budgets, and of a scale that's never going to be absorbed by efficiencies, and is going to require some pretty eye-watering cuts to the services we provide to London, and we're working through what those will be.
The conclusion is surely that policing in this country is broken. Trust in the police is statistically at an all-time low. 52% of adults told a YouGov survey that they had no/not very much confidence in the police to tackle crime locally, compared to 39% in October 2019. Regular everyday crimes go largely unsolved, and now to top it all, they're getting their priorities completely wrong and spending too much time investigating posts on social media. And I think a key part of this is, Kamal, you talked about the ability of the police to investigate crime. I think some people are doubting the willingness of police to investigate crime. And one thing that's happened since the police went quote-unquote woke is a lot of white middle-class people are discovering something that working class and people of colour knew for decades, which is the police can get it wrong and they can come after innocent people. And what a turnaround. Isn't it funny that it takes the police going woke, perhaps, for white middle-class people to actually begin to understand and empathise what minority communities have known for a very long time?
The police are not very good at solving crime, and that surely is what needs to change.
Yeah.